My husband left me for his secretary, Madison, the daughter of my family friend, and emptied our joint accounts the same day. I've outgrown this marriage, Quinn. You were never ambitious enough for me, he said while packing his designer suits. I smiled politely and watched him leave. 3 weeks later, when he discovered I had access to his secret offshore millions, the look on his face was worth every tear I'd shed. I sat in my kitchen, watching the steam rise from my untouched coffee. It had been exactly 7 days since Archer walked out. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 7 days since he'd texted me the address of his lawyer and instructions to make this painless for everyone involved. 7 days of friends walking on eggshells around me, never quite meeting my eyes when they asked how I was holding up. The kitchen still gleamed with the renovation we'd completed last spring. Viking range, marble countertops, custom cabinetry. All Archer's choices. If you're going to be a stay-at-home wife, he'd said, you should at least have a proper kitchen. Never mind that I'd put my own career on hold when his investment firm, Callaway Partners, had expanded internationally. Never mind the dinner parties I'd hosted for his clients, the networking I'd facilitated, the connections I'd leveraged through my own family to help him climb. My phone vibrated against the countertop. Veronica, my oldest friend and the only person who hadn't treated me like I might shatter. Have you seen it? She asked when I picked up. Seen what? Instagram. Madison's Instagram. Madison Campbell, daughter of Elsa Campbell, my mother's friend from university days. Madison, who I'd helped secure an executive assistant position at Archer's firm when she graduated with her business degree last year. Madison, who had apparently been sleeping with my husband for the past 6 months. I'm not torturing myself. With social media, V, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Quinn, you need to see this. They're in Santorini, at that resort you always wanted to visit. My heart constricted. The Aero Santorini, the exclusive cliffside resort I'd been dropping hints about for our 15th anniversary next year. 5 yes. Private suites, infinity pools overlooking the caldera, personal staff. He said the company is cutting costs, I whispered. He said we needed to be careful with money because of market volatility. Well, he's being anything but careful in these photos. I'm coming over. 30 minutes later, Veronica was at my kitchen, island, tablet in hand, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun, eyes fierce with protective anger. You don't have to look, she said softly, contradicting her earlier insistence. Show me. She slid the tablet toward me. Madison's Instagram feed filled the screen. Madison, with her perfect blonde waves and impossibly white teeth, lounging by an infinity pool that seemed to drop directly into the Aegean. Madison in a white bikini, raising a champagne glass toward the camera. And there, in the next photo, his arm around her waist, was Archer. My husband of 14 years, looking younger somehow, golden and relaxed in a way he hadn't been at home for years. The caption read, New beginnings with my love. Blessed Santorini. Love Udo, the moon and back. There's more, Veronica said gently. She scrolled down. More photos, more paradise. Then a close-up of Madison's left hand, a massive diamond catching the Mediterranean light. That's not the ring he gave me, I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. My engagement ring had been meaningful but modest, chosen before Archer's first big promotion. Before Callaway Partners had transformed from a promising boutique firm to a financial powerhouse, this new ring was ostentatious, showy. It screamed new money and desperation. Quinn, Veronica hesitated. Have you talked to your lawyer about the accounts? About what you're entitled to? I nodded. Everything's joint, but when I went to transfer my usual household budget, the accounts were nearly empty. Just enough left for the mortgage payment this month. He can't do that. Veronica's outrage filled the kitchen. That's financial abuse. It's probably illegal. His name is on everything. The lawyer said it complicates things. I took a sip of my now cold coffee. He left me a note, said it was temporary until we work out the settlement, that I should reach out if I need anything essential. Veronica's expression darkened. After 14 years of marriage, after you moved to 3 different cities for his career, after you managed his household and his social life while he built his precious company, I stared out the window at my meticulously landscaped backyard. Another project I'd managed while Archer worked 14-hour days. Another investment in a life that had apparently been temporary all along. There's something else, I said finally, turning back to Veronica. Something I haven't told anyone. Her eyebrows raised, waiting. Last month I found something strange on Archer's laptop. He'd left it open when he went to shower. There was an email confirmation from a bank I didn't recognize, in the Cayman Islands. Veronica's eyes widened. An offshore account? I didn't think much of it at first. His firm deals with international investments. But the email had his personal account on it, not his work address. And the balance. I paused, still struggling to believe the figure I'd seen. It was just over $4 million. $4 million? Veronica nearly choked on her coffee. And it's not in your joint accounts? No. The email had a password embedded in it. I wrote it down without really thinking about it. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small notebook, flipping to a page where I'd jotted down a seemingly random string of characters. Then last week, after he left, I found a flash drive in his desk drawer. It had the same bank's logo engraved on it. Veronica set her mug down slowly. Quinn, please tell me you looked at what was on that drive. I did. Last night, it had account information, access codes, everything. The account was set up 3 years ago, right after Callaway Partners expanded to include private wealth management. So while he was telling you to watch household expenses, he was siphoning money into a secret account. Money that, as far as I can tell, isn't reported anywhere. The deposits are irregular, but substantial. The last one was 2 months ago, nearly $500,000. Veronica was silent for a moment, processing. Then she reached across the island and gripped my hand. Quinn, listen to me. Before you do anything else, you need to talk to a different lawyer, not just a divorce attorney, someone who specializes in financial fraud. My stomach churned. You think he's been doing something illegal? I don't know, but legitimate money doesn't usually need to be hidden in offshore accounts. And if he's trying to hide assets from you, during the divorce, he always said I didn't understand finance, I said quietly. That I should leave the complicated stuff to him. Because he never wanted you to look too closely. Veronica's voice hardened. Quinn, you managed your family's charitable foundation before you married Archer. You have an economics degree. You understand plenty. She was right. I'd been so careful not to challenge Archer, not to threaten his need to be the financial authority in our relationship, that I'd downplayed my own knowledge and instincts for years. I know someone, Veronica continued. Kimberly Novak. We went to law school together. She specializes in high-net-worth divorces and financial crimes. She's exactly who you need right now. As Veronica made the call, I looked back at the photos of Archer and Madison in paradise. The weight of betrayal sat heavy in my chest, but alongside it, something else was forming. Something that felt strangely like purpose. For 14 years, I'd been the perfect corporate wife, supportive, undemanding, decorative when needed, invisible when not. Archer had always underestimated me. It was time to show him exactly how costly that mistake would be. Kimberly Novak's office overlooked the financial district, a view Archer had always been envious of. The attorney's reputation preceded her. Ruthless efficiency wrapped in Armani suits and a take-no-prisoners approach to Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. High-stakes divorces? Let me make sure I understand, Kimberly said, glancing up from the documents I'd provided. Your husband transferred approximately $4 million to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, never disclosed this account to you, and is now claiming financial hardship in preliminary divorce discussions? That's correct. And you have both the access credentials and documentation of the transfers? I nodded, sliding the flash drive across her desk. Everything's there, including transfers from clients that never appeared in Callaway Partners' official records. Kimberly's perfectly manicured fingers tapped thoughtfully against her desk. Mrs. Callaway, Quinn, please. I'm considering reverting to my maiden name. A small smile. Quinn, what you've brought me isn't just evidence in a divorce case. This could potentially be evidence of financial crimes. Wire fraud, tax evasion, possibly money laundering. The words hung heavy in the air between us. Part of me had known this, of course, but hearing it stated so plainly made my stomach clench. I don't want Archer to go to prison, I said, surprising myself with the admission. I just want what's fair after 14 years of marriage. Kimberly leaned forward. That's not an uncommon reaction, but I need you to understand something crucial. You've inadvertently stumbled into a position of significant leverage. Leverage that could disappear if we don't move carefully. What do you mean? Right now, your husband doesn't know that you've discovered this account. That gives us an advantage. But there's something else to consider. She hesitated. Have you accessed the account online since discovering it? Once, I admitted. Just to confirm the balance. From your home computer? I nodded. Then we need to move quickly. If he's monitoring access logs, he'll know someone other than him has viewed the account. A chill ran through me. You think he's checking? Men like your husband, men who maintain secret offshore accounts, tend to be paranoid about them, with good reason. She made a note in her legal pad. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to make 2 calls. One to a forensic accountant I work with, and another to someone I know at the district attorney's office. The district attorney? My voice rose slightly in panic. Kimberly held up a reassuring hand. Just a consultation. We need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. As she made her calls, I stared out at the city skyline. Archer was out there somewhere, perhaps in his corner office at Callaway Partners, believing he had orchestrated the perfect exit from our marriage. The thought of his confidence, his certainty that I would simply accept whatever crumbs he deigned to offer in the settlement, made something harden inside me. Kimberly ended her second call with a satisfied expression. My contact at the DA's office is very interested in what you've found. What does that mean for the divorce? It means we have options. She leaned back in her chair. Option 1. We use this information as leverage in settlement negotiations. Your husband pays you what you're entitled to, and then some, in exchange for your discretion regarding the offshore account. And option 2? We report everything to the authorities. Your husband potentially faces criminal charges, but the account might be frozen during investigation, complicating your access to those funds. I considered this. Is there an option 3? A slow smile spread across Kimberly's face. I was hoping you'd ask that. Option 3 is more creative. But first tell me, how much do you know about Callaway Partners' client structure? More than Archer realizes, I replied, thinking of the countless dinner parties, the client conversations I'd facilitated, the relationships I'd nurtured on his behalf, especially about their most important client. Harold Wingate, Kimberly. Nodded, clearly familiar with the name. Harold Wingate, billionaire, philanthropist, notoriously private about his finances and fiercely loyal to those he trusted. He'd been Archer's biggest client for 9 years, ever since I'd introduced them at a charity gala my family's foundation had hosted. Harold has been like a mentor to Archer, I explained. He's also a family friend. My father served on the board of his foundation for years. Kimberly's eyes lit with understanding. And does Mr. Wingate know about your separation? Not yet. Archer has been keeping it quiet. Harold is traditional. He values family. He wouldn't look kindly on Archer leaving his wife for his 24-year-old secretary. Especially not if that secretary is the daughter of a family friend, Kimberly added, piecing it together. Especially not then. My voice was steadier than I expected. And if Harold Wingate were to learn about this offshore account, he would pull his business immediately, I said with absolute certainty. Harold's company was investigated for tax irregularities years ago, before Archer even met him. It was a mistake by a previous financial advisor, but the experience was devastating. Harold has zero tolerance for anything that even suggests impropriety. Kimberly nodded slowly. A plan, clearly forming in her mind. So we have a client who represents a significant portion of Callaway Partners' revenue, who wouldn't approve of your husband's personal choices, and who would be particularly alarmed by evidence of financial misconduct. That's correct. My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced down, expecting Veronica checking in. Instead, I saw Archer's name. Need to talk. Lawyer says you've retained Kimberly Novak. Let's not make this uglier than it needs to be. Call me. I showed the message to Kimberly, whose smile widened. Perfect, she said. He's already nervous. Someone at my firm must have spoken to his attorney. She handed me back the phone. Don't respond yet. In fact, don't contact him at all until we've fully developed our strategy. As I left Kimberly's office an hour later, a strange sense of calm had settled over me. For the first time since seeing those Instagram photos, I felt something beyond hurt and betrayal. I felt powerful. Walking through the financial district, I passed Callaway Partners' gleaming headquarters. On impulse, I stopped at the coffee shop, in the lobby, the same one where Archer had first introduced me to Madison Campbell 18 months ago. She's brilliant, he'd said. Elsa's daughter, top of her class. She'll be an asset to the firm. The barista recognized me. Mrs. Callaway, haven't seen you in ages. The usual? Yes, thank you, Everett. I smiled, realizing Archer had no idea how many quiet allies I had accumulated over the years. People like Everett, who'd witnessed Madison and Archer's lingering lunches months before I'd discovered the affair. As I waited for my coffee, my phone buzzed again. Another text from Archer. Quinn, don't do anything rash. We can work this out. I deleted the message without responding and stepped back into the sunlight, the first genuine smile in weeks spreading across my face. 6 months earlier, life had been deceptively normal. I remembered the evening clearly. A crisp autumn night when the leaves had just begun to turn. Archer was hosting a dinner for potential investors, and I had spent the day preparing our home, coordinating with caterers, and selecting wines that would impress without appearing ostentatious. You've outdone yourself, Archer had murmured in my ear as the last guest departed, his hand resting possessively on my lower back. Harold couldn't stop raving about the event. I'd smiled, leaning into his touch, savoring the rare moment of appreciation. Did you secure the Hamilton account? Thanks to you, he'd said, kissing my temple. Your conversation with Mrs. Hamilton about her charity work sealed it. That night, we'd made love for what I now realized was one of the final times in our marriage. Afterward, Archer had fallen into a deep sleep, but I'd remained awake, mentally reviewing the dinner, identifying what could be improved for next. Time. I slipped out of bed around 2 a.m., heading downstairs to jot down notes for future reference. That's when I'd noticed Archer's laptop open on the kitchen counter, the screen glowing softly in the darkness. It wasn't unusual for him to leave it there. He often reviewed documents after I went to bed. What was unusual was the email displayed on the screen. Not from a client or colleague, but from a bank I didn't recognize. Grand Cayman Financial Services, I hesitated. Archer and I had always maintained certain boundaries. I handled the household. He handled our investments. But something about the email caught my attention. Perhaps the time it had been sent, 11:42 p.m., long after business hours, or the cryptic subject line. Confirmation of transfer, S37. Almost without conscious decision, I moved closer. The email was brief. Mr. Calloway, this confirms receipt of USD $487,000 to account GC7729031. Updated balance $3,752,992.47 monthly account verification. Double Eagle GC58 Access Portal. Link. As always, this correspondence is protected under Cayman Islands banking privacy laws. Regards, Theodore Walsh. Private Client Relations. I stared at the screen, unable to process what I was seeing. Nearly $4 million? In an account I'd never heard of? Our joint investment portfolio, the one Archer occasionally reviewed with me, totaled just over $2 million. And he had emphasized repeatedly in recent months that we needed to be fiscally conservative due to market instability. Just last week, he'd questioned the expense when I'd mentioned renovating the guest bathroom. Not the right time for unnecessary expenses, Quinn, he'd said firmly. Without thinking, I grabbed my phone and took a photo of the screen. Then, noticing a small notebook beside the laptop, I quickly copied down the verification code and account number. I heard movement upstairs. Archer. Stirring. Quickly, I closed the email and returned the screen to his investment spreadsheet, then hurried to the pantry, emerging with a glass of water just as he entered the kitchen. "Everything okay?" he asked, voice rough with sleep. "Just thirsty," I replied, my heart hammering. "Coming back to bed now." He nodded, closing the laptop and following me upstairs, completely unaware of what I'd discovered. The next morning, Archer left early for a breakfast meeting with clients. I sat at our kitchen island, staring at the photo on my phone, wondering what to do with this information. My first instinct was to confront him directly. Surely there was a reasonable explanation. Perhaps it was a client account he had access to, or a fund specifically for business expansion. But something held me back. The secretive nature of the account. The Cayman Islands location. The fact that it had never been mentioned in any of our financial discussions. I decided to wait and observe, to see if Archer would eventually mention it himself. Maybe during our annual financial review coming up in December. But December came and went. The financial review focused entirely on our joint accounts, with Archer emphasizing how market volatility meant we needed to limit major purchases. Not once did he mention the offshore account or its considerable balance. In January, I noticed small changes in his behavior. He became more protective of his phone, setting a new passcode. He started taking calls in his home office with the door closed. He mentioned a new series of late meetings that kept him at the office until after 9. Then came the company gala in February. Archer had insisted I wear my emerald green gown, the one that makes every man in the room jealous that you're mine, he'd said. I'd spent hours preparing, wanting to look perfect for him, to be the asset he'd always valued. I remembered entering the ballroom on his arm, greeting colleagues and clients with practiced charm. And then I saw them across the room, Archer and Madison, heads bent close together near the bar, his hand lingering on her lower back in exactly the way he often touched me. There was an intimacy to their posture that couldn't be explained away by professional rapport. Madison had noticed me first, stepping back abruptly, her face flushing. Archer had turned, his expression shifting from annoyance at the interruption to a carefully composed smile when he saw me. "Quinn, there you are," he'd said smoothly. "Madison was just updating me on the Westridge proposal." Madison nodded, her eyes not quite meeting mine. "Your dress is stunning, Mrs. Calloway." Thank you, Madison, I'd replied, maintaining the social grace that had been instilled in me since childhood. How's your mother? I haven't seen Elsa since her fundraiser last month. She's well. Still talking about how much your donation meant to the literacy program. The exchange had been pleasant, unremarkable to anyone observing. But I had seen the flash of guilt in Madison's eyes, the slight tensing of Archer's jaw. That night, I'd lain awake beside my husband, connecting dots I'd been unconsciously gathering for months. The late meetings, the new passwords, the offshore account, and now the lingering touch at the small of Madison Campbell's back. I didn't confront him then. Something instinctive told me to wait, to gather more information. Instead, I began paying closer attention, noticing patterns I'd previously overlooked or rationalized away. The offshore account took on new significance. No longer just a financial curiosity, it now seemed like preparation, a nest egg hidden away for a future I wasn't meant to be part of. I just hadn't realized how soon that future would arrive. The weeks following my discoveries, both of the offshore account and of Archer's increasingly obvious affair, were an exercise in self-restraint. Each morning, I'd wake beside my husband, exchange pleasant conversation over breakfast, and kiss him goodbye as he left for the office where I now knew Madison awaited him. Each night, I'd listen to his stories about challenging clients and strategy meetings that I suspected were fabrications covering his true activities. And all the while, I said nothing. "You're being awfully quiet these days," Archer commented. One evening as we prepared for bed, he was loosening his tie, watching me apply my nightly moisturizer, the expensive French brand he'd given me for Christmas. "Am I?" I kept my voice light, non-committal. "Just tired, I suppose," he approached. From behind, hands settling on my shoulders, eyes meeting mine in the bathroom mirror. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the man I'd married. Attentive, perceptive, present. "Is everything all right, Quinn? You seem distant." It would have been so easy to break then, to confront him with what I knew, to demand explanations, to unleash the hurt and betrayal building inside me. Instead, I smiled, reaching up to cover his hand with mine. "Everything's fine, just planning the Henderson dinner next week. You know how particular Joyce Henderson is about her dietary restrictions." He seemed relieved by this mundane explanation, the tension in his shoulders easing. "That's my girl, always the perfect hostess." He kissed the top of my head and returned to the bedroom. That night, I lay awake beside him, studying the profile I'd once traced with loving fingers. Who was this man? Had I ever truly known him? Or had I simply known the version of himself he'd chosen to show me? The following morning, after Archer left, I called Veronica. "I need a favor," I said without preamble when she answered. "Something discreet." "Name it," she replied immediately. No questions asked. This was why I valued her friendship. Unwavering, loyalty without judgment. "I need you to upgrade my phone. New number, new everything, but I need to keep this one active too, and I need it done without Archer knowing." There was a brief pause. "Quinn, are you in danger? Because if he's—" "No, nothing like that," I assured her quickly. "I just need privacy for conversations I'm not ready to have with him yet." Veronica, bless her, didn't push. "I'll pick you up in 20 minutes. We'll go to my carrier's store across town." By that afternoon, I had a new phone with a number known only to Veronica. My original phone remained active, the one Archer would call or text, the one that maintained the illusion that nothing had changed. My next step was securing my personal documents. While Archer was at a weekend golf retreat, which an Instagram check confirmed was actually a beach getaway with Madison, I methodically gathered my birth certificate, passport, social security card, and other essential documents from our shared home safe. I opened a new bank account at a credit union where Callaway Partners had no connections, transferring a modest sum from my personal spending account. Not enough to alert Archer, but enough to give me breathing room if needed. Began copying financial records, taking photos of tax returns, documenting the contents of our home. I researched divorce laws in our state, learning about equitable distribution, alimony considerations, the complex division of assets acquired during marriage, all while smiling over dinner, attending social functions on Archer's arm, and maintaining the perfect facade of our marriage. The hardest part was facing Elsa Campbell at a charity luncheon in early March. Madison's mother had always been kind to me, had even expressed delight years ago when I'd helped her daughter secure the position at Archer's firm. "Quinn, darling." Elsa embraced me warmly. "You look absolutely radiant. That Mediterranean diet you mentioned must be working wonders." I returned her hug, fighting the knot in my stomach. Did she know? Was she complicit in her daughter's affair? With my husband? Or was she as deceived as I had been? "How's Madison?" I asked, managing to keep my voice steady. "Archer mentions how valuable she's become to the firm." Something flickered across Elsa's face. Discomfort? Guilt? It was gone, so quickly I couldn't be certain. "Thriving," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Working too hard, of course. You know how these young, ambitious types can be." "Indeed," I murmured. "Perhaps we should have dinner soon, the four of us?" "It's been too long." Elsa's composure faltered momentarily. What a lovely idea. Though Madison's schedule is so unpredictable these days, let me check with her and get back to you. She never did. That evening, I found Archer in his home office, ostensibly reviewing quarterly reports. I leaned against the doorframe watching him work, wondering if he was actually messaging Madison. "I saw Elsa Campbell today," I said casually. His fingers paused imperceptibly over the keyboard before resuming their rhythm. "How is she?" "Well, we discussed having dinner together soon. You, me, Elsa, and Madison. I thought it might be nice." Now his fingers stopped completely. He swiveled his chair to face me, expression carefully neutral. "That's probably not the best idea right now. Madison's working on a major project for the Wingate account. I need her focused." "Of course," I conceded easily. It was just a thought, as I turned to leave. He called after me. "Quinn, is everything okay? You've seemed different lately." I smiled. "Everything's fine, Archer. Just busy with the Foundation's spring fundraiser." His relief was almost palpable. He returned to his computer, crisis averted, completely unaware that I'd been testing him, watching his reactions, gathering more information for the moment when I would finally break my silence. That moment came sooner than I expected. Just 2 weeks later, I returned from a Foundation meeting to find Archer waiting in our living room, uncharacteristically home before 7. "We need to talk," he said, his expression grave yet somehow rehearsed, as though he'd practiced this moment in front of a mirror. I set down my purse calmly, anticipation and dread mingling in my stomach. "All right." "This isn't working anymore, Quinn." He delivered the line with practiced regret. "We've grown apart. I think we both know it." I said nothing, watching him pace the room we decorated together years ago. "I'll always care for you," he continued, mistaking my silence for shock. "But I need more. A partner who understands my ambitions, who challenges me intellectually." Still, I remained silent, observing the performance of a man who believed himself to be handling an uncomfortable situation with compassion and dignity. "Think we should separate," he concluded. "I've already spoken to my lawyer. He'll contact yours to make arrangements. I promise I'll be fair." Finally, I spoke. "Is it Madison?" His expression changed. Surprise, then quick calculation. "This isn't about anyone else. This is about us." "Is it Madison?" I repeated, my voice steady. Archer sighed, apparently deciding honesty was now the expedient choice. Yes. It wasn't planned, Quinn. These things, they just happen sometimes. I nodded slowly. I see. And when were you planning to tell me about the offshore account? What offshore account? Archer's face betrayed him, a momentary widening of the eyes, a subtle tensing of his jaw, before he recovered with a dismissive laugh. I have no idea what you're talking about, Quinn. I held his gaze, saying nothing. This was a technique I'd learned from my father, a federal judge known for his unflinching patience in the courtroom. Silence often revealed more than questions. Archer filled the void, as I knew he would. Look, this is already difficult enough without making baseless accusations. I've offered a fair separation. Grand Cayman Financial Services, I said quietly. Account number GC7729031. Current balance just over $4 million. Would you like me to continue? His face drained of color. How did you... Does it matter? I moved to the bar cart in the corner of our living room, pouring myself a modest glass of the Macallan 18 he'd always reserved for special occasions. What matters is that you were planning to leave me without my fair share of our marital assets. Assets that I suspect weren't exactly obtained through conventional means. He crossed the room quickly, lowering his voice as if someone might be listening. Quinn, you don't understand what you're talking about. That account is complicated. It's for a special investment vehicle for select clients. Then why isn't it on the Callaway Partners books? I asked, sipping the whiskey. Why were you transferring money on your personal laptop at midnight? Why haven't you ever mentioned it in our financial discussions? Archer ran a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair, a rare gesture of genuine distress. This isn't something we should discuss without legal counsel present. I agree completely. I set down my glass. My attorney will be in touch with yours. In the meantime, I think you should pack what you need for a few weeks. I'll be staying in the house until this is resolved. You can't just... I can, and I am. My voice remained level, betraying none of the turmoil beneath. Unless you'd prefer I call Harold Wingate right now to discuss your creative accounting practices. The mention of Harold's name was calculated, and it hit its mark. Archer's face contorted with a flash of naked fear before settling into cold anger. You wouldn't I? I picked up my phone. Should we find out? 20 minutes later, Archer was gone, a hastily packed suitcase in hand, the front door closing behind him with a decisive click. Only then did I allow myself to sink onto the sofa, hands trembling, the facade of composure crumbling in the sudden silence of my home. How? Had we arrived here? How had the man who'd once been my partner, my confidant, my future, become this stranger plotting his escape with my family friend's daughter? My mind drifted back 15 years, to the beginning, before Callaway Partners, before the wealth, before Madison Campbell existed as anything but a child in her mother's Christmas cards. I'd met Archer at a charity auction benefiting education in underserved communities. I was there representing my family's foundation. He was an ambitious financial advisor with a boutique firm, attending at his boss's insistence. These events are where the real connections happen, he told me later, after we'd been seated at the same table, after he'd bid aggressively on a weekend getaway package I'd mentioned admiring. He was handsome, certainly, tall and confident, with a smile that transformed his serious face into something almost boyish. But what had attracted me most was his hunger, his clear-eyed determination to build something meaningful. My father was a high school math teacher, he'd shared over our third date, the first time I'd seen vulnerability beneath his polished exterior. Brilliant with numbers, but no head for business. He could have been so much more with the right opportunities. I'd responded by telling him about my own father, stern, accomplished, expectations always set just beyond reach. That's why the foundation matters to me, I'd explained. It's about creating opportunities, opening doors that would otherwise remain closed. We'd connected over this shared value, or what I'd believed was shared. The desire to build something that mattered, that helped others rise. 6 months later, he proposed. A year after that, we married in a tasteful ceremony that merged his ambition with my family's understated wealth and connections. Archer had been working at Meridian Financial then, a respectable mid-sized firm where he'd already earned a reputation for attracting valuable clients. But he'd spoken often of his dream to launch his own company, to build something with his name on it. 5 years, he'd say. 5 years of building relationships, proving concepts, saving capital, then we make our move. What he hadn't mentioned was how crucial my connections would be to that plan. Our 3rd year of marriage, I introduced Archer to Harold Wingate at a foundation event. Harold, my father's friend, a self-made billionaire with a passion for education reform, had taken an immediate liking to Archer's earnest ambition. "Your young man has promise," Harold had told me privately. "Smart, driven, but he needs seasoning. Experience handling real wealth." What had begun as mentorship quickly evolved into a professional relationship. Harold moved his considerable portfolio to Meridian specifically to work with Archer. Other wealthy families in our circle followed Harold's lead, impressed by his endorsement. Within 18 months, Archer was Meridian's top performer, his client list filled with names I'd grown up with, people who'd attended my parents' dinner, parties and whose children had been my childhood playmates. When Archer finally left Meridian to establish Callaway Partners, Harold didn't just follow. He invested in the venture, providing both capital and credibility to the fledgling firm. "This is it, Quinn," Archer had whispered the night they signed the partnership agreement, his eyes bright with emotion. "Everything we've worked for. Everything we've worked for." That had been the narrative, our shared dream, our joint achievement. But the reality had been more complex. While Archer built Callaway Partners, I managed our home, our social calendar, our philanthropic activities. I cultivated relationships with the spouses of his clients, hosted dinners where business was discussed over wines I'd selected, created the environment where deals were conceived and trust was established. I'd embraced this role willingly, finding purpose in supporting his vision, believing we were building a legacy together. When had that balanced partnership transformed into something so unequal? When had I become, in his mind, not an asset, but a liability? Perhaps the seeds had been planted at the Morrisons' holiday party 4 years ago, when Harold had pulled me aside, bourbon in hand, voice lowered confidentially. "Your husband's got real talent, Quinn," he'd said. "But remember, the most important asset in wealth management isn't financial acumen. It's trust. And that trust extends to the whole package." He'd gestured vaguely toward where Archer stood, networking across the room. "Your steady presence, your family's reputation, that matters more than he probably realizes." Had Archer overheard, or had someone reported the conversation to him? I couldn't be certain, but something had shifted afterward. Subtle at first, Archer began questioning my expenses more closely, suggesting I was out of touch with normal financial constraints. As Callaway Partners grew, as Archer's confidence expanded with his success, he'd begun undermining me in small ways, correcting my understanding of investment concepts at dinner parties, joking about my expensive tastes to clients, gradually rewriting our history so that my contributions diminished while his expanded. And now, this final betrayal. Not just the affair with Madison, but the calculated financial deception, the secret account built while he lectured me about household budgets. As I sat alone in our living room, the weight of 15 years settled around me. I'd compromised myself piece by piece, adapting to his growing ego, accepting his narrative that my role was secondary, supportive, decorative, but no more. "You actually have significantly more leverage than your husband realizes," Kimberly said, spreading documents across her conference table. 3 days had passed since I'd confronted Archer about the offshore account and sent him packing. Now I sat in Kimberly's office with her forensic accountant, Trevor, a soft-spoken man with meticulous attention to detail. "We've completed our preliminary analysis of the account information," Trevor explained, adjusting his glasses. "And it's concerning." "Concerning how?" I asked. "The deposits don't follow any consistent pattern that would indicate legitimate business transactions. They coincide with major client acquisitions at Callaway Partners, but the amounts don't correspond to any standard fee structure." Kimberly tapped a highlighted section of the report. "In simple terms, we believe these may be undisclosed payments from clients, essentially kickbacks for preferential treatment of their investments. That would violate SEC regulations," I said, recalling conversations with my father about financial ethics. "Among other things," Trevor nodded. "There are also indications of commingled funds, client money being temporarily diverted before being reinvested." "The colloquial term is theft," Kimberly added dryly. I stared at the papers before me, seeing not just numbers, but the architecture of betrayal, systematic, calculated, years in the making. "What does this mean for the divorce?" Kimberly leaned forward, her expression serious but satisfied. "It means you hold the keys to Archer's entire future. If these financial irregularities became public or were reported to the SEC and IRS, I don't want to destroy him," I said quietly. "Despite everything. Understandable. But you deserve your fair share, and then some, considering what he was planning." She slid a document toward me, a copy of a real estate contract. "2 months ago, your husband purchased a beach house in Malibu, all cash transaction through a shell company, $3 million. My stomach tightened. "Our dream home." "The property isn't in your name," Trevor noted gently. "It's owned by Eagle Vista LLC, which traces back to the Cayman account." "For Madison," I whispered. "A love nest purchased with hidden money." Kimberly's expression softened marginally. "Your position is extraordinarily strong. With the evidence you've provided, we can pursue not just an equitable division of known marital assets, but a claim on these hidden funds as well. And the beach house? The court could force its sale, with proceeds divided appropriately. Or—" Kimberly paused, a slight smile playing at her lips. "You could become the sole owner. A fitting irony, wouldn't you say?" For the first time in weeks, I found myself smiling genuinely. "Yes, I believe it would be." Trevor cleared his throat. "There's one more thing. The Cayman account has seen unusual activity in the past 48 hours. "What kind of activity?" "Multiple access attempts. And a transfer request for $2 million that was declined due to security protocols." "He's trying to move the money," I realized. Kimberly nodded. "Trying and failing. The account requires both the digital key on that flash drive and the verification code you memorized. He's missing half the puzzle." My phone buzzed. Archer, again. I glanced at the screen. "Quinn, please. We need to talk ASAP. Things aren't what they seem. I can explain everything about the account. Call me back." I showed the message to Kimberly, who read it with a raised eyebrow. "He's panicking," she observed. "Good. Let him sweat." As I left her office, I felt something I hadn't experienced since, discovering Archer's betrayal, genuine control over my situation. The hidden advantage I now possessed wasn't just financial, it was informational. Archer had underestimated me for years, believing I was too trusting, too accommodating to notice his machinations. That misjudgment would prove to be his most expensive mistake. Looking back, the signs had been there for years. Like water damage spreading beneath perfectly painted walls, our marriage had been deteriorating long before the visible cracks appeared. I remembered clearly the first significant shift, Archer's 40th birthday, 3 years ago. I'd planned an intimate gathering at Le Bernardin, his favorite restaurant. Just 20 guests, close friends, and his most valued clients, including Harold Wingate. During the toast, Harold had raised his glass to me. To Quinn, he'd said warmly, the woman behind Callaway Partners' success. We all know who really builds the relationships that matter. It was meant as a compliment, an acknowledgement of my role in cultivating the social connections that fueled Archer's business. The guests had chuckled appreciatively, glasses raised. But later that night, as our car carried us home, Archer's silence had radiated tension. "Everything okay?" I'd asked, reaching for his hand. He'd pulled away slightly. "Harold makes it sound like you're the reason for my success. Like I couldn't have built Callaway Partners without you playing hostess." "That's not what he meant," I'd said, surprised by his reaction. He was just being gracious. He meant exactly what he said. Archer's voice had hardened. "He's always had a soft spot for you. Sometimes I think he values your opinion more than mine." It was the first time I'd glimpsed this insecurity, this fear that his accomplishments might be attributed to my family connections rather than his own merit. I'd reassured him, downplayed my contributions, reinforced his narrative of self-made success. After that night, I became more careful about shining in public. I deferred to Archer in conversations, directed compliments his way, never mentioned client relationships that had originated through my family connections. And still, the distance grew. The next year brought subtle changes in our daily rhythms. Archer began traveling more frequently, business trips that stretched from 2 days to 4, from domestic destinations to international ones. "The Asian markets are crucial for our expansion," he'd explain, packing his carefully tailored suits. "These relationships have to be built in person." I'd offered to accompany him to Tokyo, Singapore, Hong Kong. "We could make a vacation of it," I'd suggested. "I haven't seen the cherry blossoms in years." "This is work, Quinn, not pleasure," he'd replied dismissively. "You'd be bored in meetings all day, and I can't babysit you through foreign cities." Babysit. As if I hadn't traveled extensively before we met, as if I hadn't lived abroad during college. But I'd swallowed the insult, nodded understanding, wished him a productive trip. Only later did I wonder about those trips, the evenings unaccounted for, the charges at restaurants far too expensive for business dinners, the late-night calls he'd take on our balcony, voice lowered. Had Madison accompanied him? Or had there been others before her? When he returned from these trips, our intimacy became increasingly perfunctory. Sex evolved from a genuine connection to a scheduled maintenance activity, performed with decreasing frequency and growing detachment. "Tired from the trip," he'd murmur, turning away. Or, "Early meeting tomorrow," as he remained absorbed in his phone. I'd told myself this was normal for long-term marriages, for busy professionals in their 40s. I'd focused on the framework of our life together, the beautiful home, the respected position in our community, the comfortable routine, rather than the emptiness spreading inside it. Last Christmas had brought another telling moment. For 15 years, I'd selected thoughtful gifts for Archer. A vintage watch he'd admired, first edition books by authors he respected, experiences we could share. His gifts to me had once been equally personal, jewelry chosen with my taste. In mind, art that reflected conversations we'd had, weekend getaways to places I'd mentioned wanting to visit. But last Christmas, he'd handed me a jewelry box containing an ostentatious diamond necklace. Beautiful, but nothing like my usual understated style. The card had been signed by his assistant. When I'd tried it on, forcing enthusiasm, he'd barely looked up from his phone to approve. "It'll look perfect at the McAllister Gala," he'd said absently. "Their new foundation director will be there, could be a valuable client." I'd understood then that the necklace wasn't a gift for me, but a business accessory, an investment in the corporate wife image that served his purposes. Later that day, I'd found the receipt in his coat pocket while hanging it up. The necklace had been purchased at the same time as another item, a delicate gold bracelet with a single pearl, exactly the type of elegant, minimalist piece I actually preferred. But that bracelet had never been given to me. I remembered staring at the receipt, a cold certainty settling in my stomach. Even then, I'd talked myself out of the obvious conclusion. Perhaps it was for his mother, I'd reasoned, or a token of appreciation for a valued employee. The irony was bitter now. I'd been so dedicated to preserving our marriage, to maintaining the perfect image, that I'd willfully ignored the evidence of its collapse. After discovering the Cayman account, after confronting Archer and sending him away, I'd found myself wandering through our home, seeing it with new eyes. The framed photos that created the illusion of an intimate partnership. The matching towels and robes, the his and hers sinks, the king bed where we'd grown increasingly separate despite physical proximity. All of it, all the trappings of our marriage, had become a theater set, convincing from the audience but hollow behind the facade. Now, sitting in my living room with a glass of wine, I scrolled through Madison's Instagram again. The Santorini photos had been joined by new ones, Madison and Archer on a private yacht, her diamond ring prominently displayed. The caption read, "Dreams really do come true. Engaged, my forever." I zoomed in on Archer's face, searching for signs of the man I'd married. He looked happy, genuinely happy, in a way I hadn't seen in years. Had he ever loved me? Or had I simply been a strategic choice, a beneficial merger rather than a true partnership? Perhaps it didn't matter anymore. What mattered was what came next. Harold Wingate's Westchester estate appeared through the trees after I passed through imposing gates and navigated a winding driveway. The housekeeper led me through the grand foyer to Harold's mahogany-paneled study, where the 72-year-old billionaire rose to greet me. "Quinn, this is unexpected. Is Archer with you?" "No, Harold. I came alone." I accepted his brief hug. "I hope you don't mind the intrusion." "Nonsense. You're always welcome." He gestured to a comfortable chair. "Margaret, bring us some tea, would you?" After the housekeeper departed, Harold studied me carefully. "You look troubled. What's happened?" "Archer and I have separated," I said, deciding directness was best. Harold's expression registered surprise, then concern. "I'm sorry to hear that. It's not just a rough patch. He's leaving me for his assistant, Madison Campbell." His eyebrows shot up. "Elsa's daughter? The one you helped place at the firm?" I nodded, the irony still bitter. "There's more," I continued. "I've discovered some concerning financial irregularities, an offshore account, unusual transactions." The housekeeper's return with tea momentarily paused our conversation. After she departed, Harold poured for us, both his movements deliberate. "Quinn, I've had concerns about Archer's business practices for some time." His admission came reluctantly. Nothing concrete, just patterns that didn't quite add up. "What kind of patterns?" "Returns that seemed too consistent. Investment opportunities that emerged too conveniently. Staff turnover in the compliance department." He sighed heavily. "About 3 years ago, I reduced my active investments with Callaway Partners. I kept enough to maintain the relationship, but—" "You were protecting yourself," I realized. Harold nodded. "I should have said something to you, but I had no proof, just instincts. And you seemed so happy, so proud of what Archer was building." 6 months ago, he continued, I hired an independent auditor to review all my investments, including Callaway Partners. The auditor suggested a deeper investigation, but I hesitated because of you, Quinn. I didn't want to disrupt your life if my suspicions were unfounded. For the next 30 minutes, I outlined everything: the Cayman account, the suspicious transactions, the Malibu property. Harold listened without interruption, his expression growing increasingly grave. "This is worse than I imagined," he said finally. "Not just ethical breaches, but potentially criminal actions." He returned to his desk, his decision apparently made. "Next week, I'm moving all remaining investments away from Callaway Partners. I've already begun the process quietly. Harold, I didn't come here to ask you to withdraw. He held up a hand. This is my decision, based on information I should have acted on months ago. But there's something else. His voice lowered confidentially. The Wellington Fund, the position Archer manages for my foundation, represents nearly 30% of Callaway Partners' assets under management. I understood immediately. That withdrawal alone could destabilize the firm. Precisely. Which gives you a very limited window to secure what's rightfully yours before the house of cards potentially collapses. His gaze held mine. Do you understand? What I'm telling you, Quinn. I do. My heart raced with the implications. How much time do I have? The paperwork will be processed Monday morning, before the markets open. 3 days. I had 3 days to act. Thank you, Harold. He nodded once, decisively. You've always been too good for him, Quinn. I should have told you that too. We need to move quickly, I told Kimberly during our emergency meeting Friday afternoon. Harold Wingate is pulling all his investments from Callaway Partners on Monday morning. Kimberly's eyebrows shot up. All of them? Including the Wellington Fund? Especially the Wellington Fund. That changes our timeline considerably, she said, reaching for her phone. Trevor, we need you in the conference room, now. While we waited for the forensic accountant, I filled Veronica in on my conversation with Harold. This is going to destroy Callaway Partners, she said. Once word gets out that Harold Wingate has lost confidence in the firm, there will be a stampede for the exits, Kimberly confirmed. Every major client will follow Harold's lead. Trevor arrived with his laptop and folders. Kimberly quickly outlined our compressed timeline. We have until market open Monday, she concluded. Approximately 68 hours to secure Quinn's interest before the potential collapse of Callaway Partners. Trevor nodded, already typing. I'll need to modify our strategy. The offshore account is our primary concern. Once the firm destabilizes, Archer may attempt more aggressive measures to protect those funds. Can we freeze the account? I asked. Not directly, Trevor replied. But we can implement a sort of dead man switch. If anyone attempts to transfer funds without proper authentication, both the digital key and your verification code, it would trigger an automatic notification to banking authorities in the Cayman Islands. Would that stop the transfer? Not immediately, but it would create a paper trail and regulatory scrutiny that Archer would desperately want to avoid. Kimberly made notes of her own. We need a two-pronged approach. First, secure the offshore assets. Second, formalize your claim to the known marital assets before Callaway Partners experiences any public destabilization. How do we do that? Veronica asked. Typically, divorce proceedings freeze assets until formal division, but we don't have time for standard procedures. Kimberly tapped her pen thoughtfully. We need Archer to sign a postnuptial agreement. Today. I stared at her. He'll never agree to that. He will if the alternative is an SEC investigation initiated before market open Monday. The next hour was a blur of activity. Trevor secured the Cayman account while Kimberly drafted a post-nuptial agreement. Veronica kept me grounded, bringing coffee and reassurance as the plan took shape. Now we need to get Archer here, Kimberly said. No warnings, no preparation. We need him off balance. He's been calling and texting for days, I said. I could respond now, suggest meeting at your office to discuss options. Perfect. But don't mention that I'll be present. I composed the message carefully. Archer, I'm ready to talk. Meet me at 555 Madison Avenue, Suite 1200, at 4 p.m. today to discuss our situation privately. No lawyers, just us. His response came almost immediately. Finally, I'll be there. Thank you, Quinn. He's desperate, Veronica observed. He must suspect something's wrong with the Cayman account. Good, Kimberly said. Desperation makes people careless. At precisely 3:55 p.m., the receptionist called. Mr. Calloway is here, though he seems surprised this is a law office. Send him to conference room B, Kimberly instructed. Quinn, you ready? I nodded, smoothing my skirt and squaring my shoulders. Remember, she said quietly. You hold all the cards now. He just doesn't know it yet. Archer looked haggard when I entered, his usual immaculate appearance slightly frayed. His tie was perfectly knotted, his suit expertly tailored, but dark. Circles shadowed his eyes, and a muscle twitched in his jaw. Quinn? He rose quickly, relief evident. Thank you for agreeing to meet. I've been so worried. He stopped abruptly as Kimberly entered behind me. What is this? You said no lawyers. I said no lawyers for you, I replied calmly, taking a seat across from him. Please sit down, Archer. This won't take long. He remained standing, anger replacing relief. If you've brought counsel, I should have mine present as well. Feel. Free to call him, Kimberly said smoothly, setting a document on the table. Though you might want to hear our proposal first. It's time-sensitive. What proposal? His eyes darted to the document, then back to my face. The Cayman account is perfectly legitimate, he began. For accepting undisclosed payments from clients, for commingling investor funds, for purchasing property through shell companies. I kept my voice level. Are those your legitimate explanations, Archer? The blood drained from his face. He sank slowly into the chair opposite me. How did you— It doesn't matter, Kimberly interjected. What matters is that we have documented evidence of financial improprieties that would interest the SEC, the IRS, and possibly the FBI. Evidence we are prepared to submit first thing Monday morning. Unless— Archer's voice had dropped to a whisper. Unless you sign this. I pushed the postnuptial agreement toward him. The signed postnuptial agreement sat between us like a physical manifestation of our fractured marriage. Archer stared at it, his signature still glistening with wet ink, the magnitude of what had just happened settling over him. I think we're finished here, Kimberly said, collecting the document. My office will coordinate with your attorney on implementation details. Archer didn't move. His gaze remained fixed on the spot where the agreement had been. Quinn, he said finally, his voice unnaturally quiet. Could I have a moment? Alone? Kimberly glanced at me, eyebrow raised in silent question. It's all right, I told her. I'll meet you in your office in a few minutes. After Kimberly departed, closing the door behind her, silence stretched between us. Through the glass walls, I could see Veronica watching vigilantly from the reception area. How long have you known? Archer asked eventually. About the Cayman account? Long enough. And you've been planning this ambush all this time? While I was trying to reach you? While I was worried sick about you? A hollow laugh escaped me. Worried sick about me? Or worried sick about your money? He had the grace to look ashamed, if only momentarily. Both, if you can believe it. I can't, actually. His shoulders slumped, the perfect posture he'd always maintained now curved in defeat. I never meant for any of this to happen, Quinn. Which part? The secret offshore account? The affair with Madison? Or getting caught? Pain flickered across his face at Madison's name. She's not answering my calls, since yesterday. Imagine that, I said coolly. Your fiancé isn't taking your calls. Perhaps she's busy enjoying Santorini. She's not my fiancé. He closed his eyes briefly. That was for appearances. We were never engaged. This caught me off guard. The ring? The Instagram announcements? A calculated decision, he admitted, not meeting my eyes. When rumors started circulating about Harold potentially pulling his investments, I needed to project stability. Madison was amenable to helping create that impression. The callous pragmatism stunned me. Not an affair of passion or genuine connection, but a strategic alliance, another business arrangement in Archer's world. Did she know? About your plans for me? For our marriage? His hesitation told me everything. She understood the situation. I see. So Madison wasn't just your lover. She was your accomplice. That's an ugly word. It's an ugly situation. He leaned forward, suddenly earnest. Quinn, the offshore account wasn't just about hiding money from you. It was protection against market volatility, against regulatory overreach. Every major player in finance maintains similar structures. Is that what you tell yourself? The difference is that everyone doesn't drain joint accounts the moment they walk out on their spouse. Everyone doesn't lie to their wife about financial hardship while secretly buying beach houses for their secretary. Assistant, he corrected automatically, then winced. I'm sorry. I'm not thinking clearly. Apparently not, since you've lost. Your wife, potentially your business, and it seems your mistress as well. All in 1 week. Archer looked up, sudden suspicion hardening his features. Did you contact Madison? Tell her about the account? I didn't need to, I replied truthfully, though I imagine news travels fast once the Wellington Fund withdrawal was initiated. Harold. Understanding dawned. He told others he was pulling out, as any prudent investor would, upon discovering potential irregularities. Archer's hands clenched into fists. This will destroy everything, not just the firm, my reputation, my future. Was that your plan all along? Total annihilation? No. Archer, that was your plan for me. I met his gaze steadily. I'm simply ensuring equitable consequences. By ruining me? By holding you accountable. I rose from my chair, suddenly exhausted. Whatever happens to Callaway Partners now is between you and your clients. I've secured what's mine. As I turned to leave, he called after me, his voice catching. What am I supposed to do now? I paused at the door, looking back at the man I'd once built my life around. In that moment, he seemed smaller somehow, diminished without the scaffolding of his carefully constructed success. That's not my concern, anymore, I said quietly. But if you want advice, try the truth. It's surprisingly liberating. Stepping into the reception area, I felt Veronica's arm slip supportively around my shoulders. Are you okay? She asked softly. I will be, I replied, surprised to discover I meant it. The weekend passed in a strange limbo. While Archer presumably scrambled to save Callaway Partners from Monday's impending withdrawal, I secluded myself at home, ignoring the constant buzzing of my phone as news spread through our social circle. Monday morning arrived with a sense of inevitability. I sat in my kitchen, coffee in hand, watching financial news on my tablet. The headline appeared shortly after market open. Breaking, major outflows at Callaway Partners. As Wingate Fund withdraws billions, I didn't need to read the article to imagine the chaos unfolding at Archer's office. The Wellington Fund's withdrawal wouldn't be a secret. In the financial world, such movements created immediate ripples. Other investors would be calling, demanding explanations, possibly initiating their own withdrawals. By noon, Kimberly called with an update. The financial press is circling, she reported. Rumors about improprieties at Callaway Partners are starting to surface. Nothing specific yet, but whispers about irregular account management and client concerns. Has Archer contacted you? I asked. His attorney has. They're requesting a meeting to review certain terms of the postnuptial agreement. What does that mean? It means they're getting desperate, Kimberly said, satisfaction evident in her voice. But the agreement is ironclad. Every I dotted, every T crossed. After our call, I did something I'd been avoiding. I checked Madison's Instagram. Her Santorini photos were gone. So were all images of Archer. Her most recent post showed a Miami beach at sunset, captioned simply, "New beginnings, again." Resilience, so she'd fled to Florida. Interesting. Later that afternoon, Trevor arrived at my house with a secure laptop. I've assembled everything. We've discovered about the offshore account, he explained, opening files on the screen. The timing of deposits, correlations with client acquisitions, the shell companies used to purchase properties. I scanned the documents, understanding now why Archer had been so quick to sign the postnuptial agreement. What Trevor had uncovered wasn't just ethically questionable, it potentially crossed into criminal territory. There's a pattern, Trevor continued, showing me a spreadsheet. Each major client that joined Callaway Partners was followed by an unusual deposit to the Cayman account. Not consistent amounts, but consistent timing. Kickbacks? I suggested. That would be my assessment. But there's something else. He opened another file. These transactions here, they show temporary redirections of client funds. Money would leave established investment accounts, appear briefly in transit accounts, then return minus small percentages. He was skimming, I realized. Carefully and not enough to raise immediate alarms, but over time, it accumulated to millions. I sat back, processing the extent of Archer's deceptions. Even knowing what I did, the systematic nature of his actions was shocking. What happens now, with this information? I asked. Trevor looked uncomfortable. That's your decision. The postnuptial agreement protects your interests regardless. But this, he gestured at the screen, this goes beyond your divorce. I understood his meaning. What I was viewing wasn't just evidence in a marital dispute. It was potential evidence of financial crimes. Crimes that had impacted not just me, but Callaway Partners' clients, employees, and the financial system itself. The question facing me now wasn't about securing what was rightfully mine. That battle was won. The question was whether I had a responsibility to ensure Archer faced consequences beyond our private reckoning. As Trevor packed up his laptop, he left me with a final thought. Mrs. Callaway, Quinn, this information doesn't disappear just because you've settled your personal affairs. Eventually, someone else might uncover these same patterns. The question is whether you want to control how and when that happens. In the wake of Trevor's revelations, I needed perspective. Beyond legal and financial advice, I invited Veronica over for dinner, setting aside the thick folder of documents to focus on reconnecting with the person who'd stood by me throughout this ordeal. The Malibu property transfer completed today, I told her as we shared a bottle of wine on my patio. Apparently, Madison never even saw the house. Archer had scheduled their first visit for next month. Veronica shook her head in disbelief. I still can't wrap my mind around all this. The Archer I knew, or thought I knew, seemed so principled. That's what makes betrayal so disorienting, I said. It forces you to question your own judgment, your own perceptions. So, what's next for you? Will you keep the beach house? Considered this. I'm not sure. It represents something Archer wanted, not necessarily something I want. The conversation turned to the future, possibilities I hadn't allowed myself to contemplate during my marriage. Travel without consideration. For Archer's business schedule. Expanding my role at my family's foundation. Perhaps even resuming the career I'd set aside. I've been thinking about Harold, I admitted. His warning came late, but he was trying to protect me in his own way. Unlike some others, Veronica pointed out, refilling our glasses. That's just it. I've been wondering who else knew, or suspected, but never said anything. The question lingered through the night and into the next morning. As I prepared for a meeting with my family's foundation board, I made a decision. I would discreetly reach out to those who might have insights into Archer's activities, not to gather ammunition, but to understand the full context of what had happened. My first conversation was with Janet Barnes, Callaway Partners' former compliance officer, who had abruptly resigned last year. I wondered when you might call, she said when we met at a quiet cafe across town. Things must be imploding over there. They are, I confirmed. But I'm more interested in what happened before. Why did you really leave, Janet? She glanced around before leaning forward. I raised concerns about certain client account activities, irregularities in transaction timing, fee structures that didn't match our published rates. Nothing definitive, just patterns that deserved investigation. And Archer dismissed these concerns? Not explicitly. He thanked me for my diligence, promised to look into it, suggested I was overworked and might benefit from a vacation. Her smile was bitter. When I returned, my security access had been restricted. 3 weeks later, I was called into a meeting about departmental restructuring and offered a generous severance package with an extensive NDA. Did you sign it? I did. I have a mortgage and 2 kids in college. She hesitated. But I kept copies of the reports I'd flagged. Strictly speaking, that might violate the NDA, but you were protecting yourself, I finished for her. Exactly. Similar conversations followed with others in Archer's orbit, a former partner who'd been bought out under mysterious circumstances, an accountant who'd transferred to another firm after expressing philosophical differences with Callaway's practices, even Archer's previous assistant, who'd been replaced by Madison after 7 loyal years. Each conversation added another piece to the puzzle, revealing not just Archer's financial misconduct, but a pattern of silencing those who questioned him, of replacing loyalty with complicity, of creating an environment where Madison's advancement at my expense seemed not just possible, but inevitable. Most surprising was my conversation with Elsa Campbell, Madison's mother, who requested we meet at her home rather than in public. I owe you an apology, Quinn, she said as soon as we were seated in her sunroom. I suspected something inappropriate between Madison and Archer months ago. I confronted her, but she insisted it was professional mentorship, nothing more. You couldn't have known, I said, though part of me wondered if that was true. I think I did know, Elsa admitted, eyes downcast. But Madison has always been headstrong, determined to make her own way, and I didn't want to lose my relationship with her by pushing too hard. She looked up, genuine regret in her expression. I should have come to you, friend to friend. I'm truly sorry. As these conversations accumulated, I realized I was building something unexpected, not just a clearer picture of Archer's deceptions, but a network of people who had been similarly deceived, similarly dismissed, similarly underestimated. People who, like me, had stories to tell and truths to share. 2 weeks after the Wellington Fund withdrawal, Callaway Partners was in crisis. Financial news outlets reported massive client outflows, emergency meetings, and potential regulatory scrutiny. Market analysts speculated about a loss of confidence in the firm's management. Through it all, I maintained my silence publicly while Kimberly efficiently executed the terms of our post-nuptial agreement. The Malibu property was now legally mine. Half of our joint assets had been transferred to accounts in my name only. The divorce proceedings were advancing smoothly, with Archer offering no resistance to the accelerated timeline. Then came the call I'd been expecting. Quinn. Archer's voice sounded hollow through the phone. We need to talk, not as adversaries, not about the divorce, about something more important. I can't imagine what that would be, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. The firm, Callaway Partners. The situation is critical. I'm aware. A pause. I'd like to meet. Just you and me. No lawyers, no forensic accountants. For old time's sake. I considered declining, but curiosity won out. When and where? Tonight. The Westerly Hotel, private dining room, 7 o'clock. His voice softened, attempting the charm that had once been so effective. Please, Quinn, it matters more than, I arrived at the Westerly precisely at 7, dressed in a simple black sheath dress that projected both confidence and restraint. The private dining room was intimate, a single table, soft lighting, a bottle of champagne chilling in an ice bucket. Archer rose when I entered, his usual impeccable appearance somewhat diminished. His custom suit hung slightly loose, as if he'd lost weight. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. "Thank you for coming," he said, pulling out my chair. "I wasn't sure you would." "Let's be clear about something," I said, remaining standing. "If this is some attempt at reconciliation, I'm leaving immediately." "It's not," he assured me quickly. "This is about salvaging what can be salvaged from a situation that's spiraled beyond either of our expectations." I took my seat, waiting. As he poured water for both of us, noticing he left the champagne untouched. "The SEC has opened an informal inquiry into Callaway Partners," he began without preamble. "Not a formal investigation yet, but preliminary questions about our client, account management practices." "I'm not surprised," I replied honestly. "No, I don't suppose you are." He met my gaze directly. "The question is whether you provided them information." I didn't. Relief flickered across his face. "Thank you for that, at least. Don't mistake my choice for mercy, Archer. I simply made a decision about my priorities." He nodded, accepting this. "That's why I wanted to meet, to discuss priorities, specifically the future of Callaway Partners." I raised an eyebrow. "I don't see how that concerns me anymore." "It does if you want to protect your settlement." He leaned forward. "If the firm collapses completely, if regulatory actions freeze assets or impose significant penalties, the value of what you received through our agreement diminishes substantially." "My settlement is secure," I reminded him. "The transfers are complete." "For the known assets, yes. But there are other considerations." His expression turned calculating. "The Cayman account, for instance, currently secure through your arrangement with the bank, but not immune to international regulatory action if a formal investigation begins." So this was his angle, fear that the offshore funds might still be compromised. "What exactly are you proposing, Archer?" "A partnership of sorts." He slid a folder across the table. "I've developed a recovery plan for Callaway Partners, new leadership structure, enhanced compliance oversight, transparent fee structures. The works." I opened the folder, skimming the document inside. "And you need what from me?" "Two things. First, your explicit non-cooperation with any regulatory inquiries. Second, your public support for the restructured firm." "Public support?" I echoed incredulously. "A statement expressing confidence in the new direction. Perhaps rejoining the firm's charitable foundation board." He attempted a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Your family name still carries weight, Quinn. Your endorsement would help stabilize client confidence." I closed the folder, studying my soon-to-be ex-husband. Even now, facing professional ruin, he was strategizing, calculating, looking for leverage and advantage. And if I decline? His expression hardened slightly. Then I fight the divorce terms, challenge the post-nuptial agreement as signed under duress. It won't succeed ultimately, but it will drag on, keeping your life in limbo while the firm, and potentially the value of your settlement, erodes. "That sounds like a threat." "It's a reality check," he countered. "We both have something to lose here, Quinn. I'm offering a path that protects both our interests." I took a sip of water, weighing his proposal against what I knew. Not just about the offshore account, but about the patterns of misconduct Janet Barnes and others had described. About the culture of silencing and sidelining those who raised concerns. "You're asking me to help you preserve a system that exploited clients' trust," I said finally. "To put my reputation behind a firm that, under your leadership, engaged in practices that would horrify those same clients if they knew." "I'm asking you to protect what we built together," he insisted. "However flawed, it still represents 15 years of both our lives." In that moment, I saw with perfect clarity what I needed to do, not just for myself, but for everyone who had been manipulated, silenced, or deceived by Archer Callaway. "No," I said simply, closing his folder and sliding it back across the table. Archer blinked, genuinely surprised. I don't think you understand what's at stake here. I understand perfectly. I met his gaze without flinching. You're asking me to become complicit in covering up misconduct that affected innocent people, clients who trusted you, employees who depended on you. It's more complicated than that, he insisted, frustration creeping into his voice. Every firm in our industry operates in gray areas. The only difference is that Callaway Partners got caught in a moment of transition. Is that what you call draining our joint accounts and running off with Madison? A moment of transition? He had the grace to look uncomfortable. That was personal, not professional. It was both, Archer, just like this meeting. I gestured to the folder between us. You're asking me to use my family name, my reputation, to salvage your career after you betrayed every principle of our marriage. So this is revenge. His expression darkened. You'll destroy a company that employs dozens of innocent people just to punish me. No, I replied calmly. This isn't about revenge. It's about accountability. I reached into my purse and removed a slim envelope, placing it on the table. What's this? He asked suspiciously. My counterproposal. I pushed it toward him. Open it. Inside was a single sheet of paper outlining terms that Kimberly, Trevor, and I had carefully crafted. Archer would resign as CEO of Callaway Partners, effective immediately. A new leadership team would be installed, including Janet Barnes returning, as Chief Compliance Officer with expanded authority. An independent audit would review all client accounts, with full disclosure to affected parties and appropriate restitution where warranted. All remaining funds from the Cayman account would be repatriated and properly reported to tax authorities. Archer read the document twice, his expression shifting from disbelief to anger. This is corporate suicide. No firm survives this kind of disclosure. A firm built on deception doesn't deserve to survive, I countered. But the people who work there deserve a chance at redemption. And if I refuse? Then tomorrow morning, the SEC receives a detailed report from Trevor Martin, containing everything we've documented about the offshore account, the client fund misappropriations, and the systematic silencing of compliance concerns. Archer's face flushed with anger. You wouldn't. I already authorized it, I said quietly. The only reason it hasn't been sent is because I wanted to give you this choice. Some choice, he scoffed. Professional execution or professional suicide? It's more than you gave me when you emptied our accounts, I reminded him. More than you gave Janet Barnes when you pushed her out for doing her job. He stared at me, a complex mix of emotions crossing his face. Rage, fear, and something that might have been a flicker of reluctant respect. You've changed, he said finally. No, Archer. I've simply stopped diminishing myself to accommodate your ego. He picked up the document again, reading the terms more carefully. The Cayman money, it would be subject to penalties, possible criminal charges. Yes, but cooperating voluntarily would likely mitigate those consequences. And my role in the AZE restructured firm? Advisory, non-executive, contingent on the independent audit findings. He laughed bitterly. So I become a figurehead in my own company, assuming I avoid prison. You keep your freedom and a chance to rebuild your reputation honestly. It's more than many in your position would get. For several minutes, Archer sat, in silence, the weight of his choices visibly pressing on him. I wondered what calculations were running through his mind. Risk assessments, probability matrices, the complex algorithms of self-preservation that had always guided his decisions. Madison reached out yesterday, he said suddenly, the non sequitur catching me off guard. From Miami. Wanted to know if there was any way to salvage her position at the firm. A humorless smile twisted his lips. Apparently her new opportunity there fell through. And what did you tell her? I haven't responded yet. He tapped his fingers against the counter-proposal. I suppose my answer depends on what happens next. I stood, gathering my purse. You have until 9 a.m. tomorrow to decide. After that, events will unfold beyond either of our control. As I turned, to leave, Archer called after me, his voice stripped of its usual confidence. Quinn, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not just for the accounts. For everything. I paused but didn't turn around. I know you are, Archer. The tragedy is that you're only sorry because you got caught. Walking out of the Westerly Hotel, I felt no triumph, no vindictive satisfaction, just a quiet certainty that I'd done what was necessary, not just for myself, but for everyone affected by Archer's choices. My phone buzzed with a text from Kimberly. How did it go? I replied simply, ball in his court. We'll know by morning. That night, I slept more peacefully than I had in months, regardless of what decision Archer might make. The burden of his deceptions was no longer mine to carry. Archer accepted the yaw. Time to the announcement came via press release at 8:30 a.m. Callaway Partners announces leadership transition and comprehensive compliance review. The carefully worded statement outlined Archer's decision to step back from day-to-day operations, while the firm underwent a proactive reassessment of internal procedures. What the press release didn't mention was the conference call that had preceded it. Archer, myself, Kimberly, and Harold Wingate confirming the specific details of the arrangement. The repatriation of the Cayman funds, the independent audit process, the restructured leadership team with Janet Barnes at its helm. You've made the right decision, Harold had told Archer, his tone both stern and oddly paternal. The only decision that gives the firm a fighting chance. The financial press initially treated the announcement as typical corporate reshuffling. By afternoon, however, more perceptive analysts were reading between the lines, noting the unusual emphasis on enhanced client transparency and third-party compliance verification. This has your fingerprints all over it, Veronica remarked when she arrived for dinner that evening, brandishing a bottle of champagne. Especially the part about establishing a client restitution fund. Pure Quinn Callaway. Practical atonement. I accepted the champagne with a smile. I had excellent advisors. But the vision was yours, she insisted, following me into the kitchen. You could have simply walked away with your settlement. You could have reported everything to the SEC and watched the firm implode. Instead, you found a third path. I shrugged, uncomfortable with her praise. It seemed the most just outcome for everyone involved. And Archer? How did he seem when it was all finalized? I paused while retrieving champagne flutes from the cabinet, considering the question. Defeated, but also relieved, maybe, as if some part of him welcomed the chance to stop running from his own decisions. The implementation began immediately. Janet Barnes returned to Callaway Partners the following Monday, now with the title of Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer and a direct reporting line to the board. The independent auditors arrived Tuesday, setting up in conference rooms and requesting client files. By week's end, preliminary findings confirmed what Trevor had already documented: patterns of preferential treatment for certain clients, undisclosed fees, questionable movement of funds. Nothing catastrophic in any individual instance, but, collectively, a clear breach of fiduciary duty. Harold Wingate, true to his word, announced his willingness to return the Wellington Fund to Callaway Partners, contingent on successful completion of the audit and implementation of recommended reforms. Other major clients adopted a wait-and-see approach, neither withdrawing remaining funds nor returning those already moved. The most surprising development came from an unexpected quarter. Elsa Campbell contacted me directly, asking to meet privately. Madison is back in New York, she said when we met for coffee. She's been offered a position at Meridian Financial, Archer's old firm before Callaway Partners. I see, I said neutrally. unsure why Elsa was sharing this information. She declined it, Elsa continued. Said she wanted to make a cleaner break from the financial world. She's applied to law school instead. She hesitated. She'd like to apologize to you, in person, when you're ready. I wasn't ready, might never be ready, but I appreciated the gesture. Tell her I wish her well, I said, meaning it more than I would have thought possible weeks earlier. The transformation of Callaway Partners continued through the summer. Client accounts were meticulously reviewed. Appropriate restitution was arranged where discrepancies were identified. New compliance systems were implemented with external verification. Archer, as agreed, transitioned to an advisory role. Still present, still involved, but no longer the unquestioned authority. No longer the sole decision-maker. In financial media interviews, he described the changes as a necessary evolution and an opportunity to realign with core values. Only those of us who knew the full story recognized these statements for what they were, carefully crafted admissions of past failures. Throughout this process, I maintained my distance professionally while ensuring the terms of our agreement were fulfilled. The divorce proceedings continued without drama or delay. By late August, the legal dissolution of our marriage was finalized, a simple document ending 15 years of shared life. That evening, I walked alone on the beach near the Malibu house, my house now. The property Archer had purchased for his future with Madison had instead become the symbol of my new beginning. Standing at the edge of the Pacific, watching the sun sink toward the horizon, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of everything that had happened. The betrayal, the deception, the painful revelations, and ultimately, the resolution that had come not through vengeance, but through justice. Autumn arrived with a gentle transition, leaves turning golden in Central Park as I settled into my new normal. The Upper East Side apartment, part of my settlement, felt different now that I'd redecorated, removing the sleek minimalism Archer had preferred and introducing warmer colors, textured fabrics, artwork I'd actually chosen. 6 months had passed since that fateful day when Archer had announced he was leaving me for Madison. 6 months of upheaval, revelation, and ultimately, transformation. My phone buzzed with a text from Kimberly. Have you seen the journal today? I hadn't. Setting down my coffee, I opened the Wall Street Journal app to find a feature on the Callaway Partners Resurrection, an in-depth piece examining how the firm had navigated its crisis and emerged with a new operational model that was being hailed as potentially industry-changing. The article highlighted Janet Barnes' expanded compliance department, the transparent fee structures, and the quarterly client reviews that had become standard practice. Buried in the middle paragraphs was a matter-of-fact mention of the undisclosed client fund irregularities that had triggered the transformation, the closest any public reporting had come to acknowledging what had really happened. Archer was quoted briefly, crediting the difficult but necessary process of institutional self-examination. Reading his carefully crafted statement, I wondered if he ever truly reflected on his personal choices or merely reframed them in whatever narrative served him best. That evening, I had dinner with Harold Wingate at his favorite steakhouse, a quarterly tradition we'd established in the aftermath. The Wellington Fund had indeed returned to Callaway Partners, but under strict oversight conditions that Harold monitored personally. The firm's actually performing better under the new structure, he noted, cutting into his prime rib. More sustainable growth, more consistent returns. Turns out ethical behavior is good business. Who knew? His eyes twinkled with ironic humor. Any word from Archer? I asked, attempting a casual tone that didn't quite succeed. Harold studied me thoughtfully. He's adapting. Chafing under the restrictions, of course, but adapting. The board keeps him on a short leash. I nodded, feeling a complex emotion I couldn't quite name. Not concern for Archer exactly, but a lingering, Awareness of our connection, the years shared, the life built together, however flawed the foundation had proven to be. And you, Quinn? How are you really doing? The question caught me off guard. Most people in my life had stopped asking, assuming the financial settlement and professional vindication had erased any lingering pain. I paused, considering my answer carefully. I'm relearning myself, who I am when I'm not defining myself in relation to Archer or Callaway Partners. It's disorienting sometimes. But good. Harold nodded approvingly. You know, when my wife left me 30 years ago now, I thought my life was over. Best thing that ever happened to me, as it turned out. Forced me to confront who I'd become. This was news to me. In all our years of friendship, Harold had never mentioned a divorce. What happened? I asked. She fell in love with my business partner. He chuckled at my surprised expression. Oh yes, it's a rather common story, isn't it? The betrayal hurt like hell at the time, but it compelled me to rebuild from the ground up. My company, my values, eventually my personal life. Is that why you took an interest in us? In Archer and me? Perhaps. He sipped his scotch thoughtfully. I recognized something in him. The same hunger for success that had consumed me. And something in you that reminded me of my ex-wife before our marriage. Changed her. A certain authenticity I hoped wouldn't get lost. As our dinner concluded and we parted ways on the sidewalk outside, Harold clasped my hand warmly. You haven't just survived this, Quinn. You've alchemized it into something meaningful. Not many have that capacity. Back home, I found myself drawn to the small office I'd created for foundation work. My family's charitable foundation had become my primary focus, particularly its women's entrepreneurship initiative. The experience with Archer had clarified my purpose, supporting women who sought financial independence and business literacy. Opening my laptop, I reviewed applications for our latest grant cycle. Each proposal represented a woman with vision, determination, and potential. Each applicant had her own story, her own challenges, her own dreams of creating something meaningful. Like me, they were defining themselves on their own terms. A notification appeared on my screen, an email from Madison Campbell. My finger hovered over the delete button before curiosity won out. Quinn, I know an apology is inadequate, but I want to offer one nonetheless. My choices hurt you deeply, and for that, I am truly sorry. Law school has been a humbling experience, forcing me to examine ethical principles I previously dismissed as inconvenient. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that your handling of the Callaway Partners situation taught me more than 3 years of business school ever did. Madison, I closed the email without responding, neither rejecting her apology nor absolving her. Some reconciliations weren't necessary for personal closure, I'd learned. Some chapters could simply end, making space for new beginnings. 1 year to the day after Archer's departure, I stood on the deck of my Malibu home, watching waves crash against the shore as sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. The house had become my sanctuary, a place of healing and reflection far from New York's constant reminders. The offshore account that had changed everything was long since closed, its contents properly distributed according to our agreement and legal requirements. Archer had paid substantial penalties but avoided criminal charges through his cooperation. Callaway Partners continued under its reformed structure, with Janet Barnes now elevated to co-CEO alongside a respected industry veteran. My phone rang, Veronica checking in, as she often did on significant dates. "How are you feeling today?" she asked. "Any regrets? Second thoughts?" I considered the question seriously, watching a seagull dance on air currents above the water. "None," I answered truthfully. "I was thinking earlier about something my grandmother used to say, that some people come into our lives as blessings, others as lessons. And Archer? Both, I think. The marriage taught me about my own resilience. Its ending taught me about my own worth. After our call ended, I walked barefoot along the shoreline, letting cold Pacific water wash over my feet. The woman who had once organized her life around Archer's ambitions, who had accepted his narrative of her limitations, who had diminished herself to avoid overshadowing him, she was gone, transformed by the very crisis meant to destroy her. In her place stood someone stronger, clearer in purpose, unwilling to compromise her integrity for comfort or connection. The divorce settlement had secured my financial future, but the true wealth I'd gained was internal: self-knowledge, boundaries, the quiet certainty that I could trust my own judgment. As darkness fell over the ocean, I thought about the complex journey from betrayal to freedom. Archer had left me for his secretary, emptied our accounts, and believed I would simply accept whatever crumbs he offered in settlement. He'd severely underestimated the woman he'd married. What I did with his offshore account hadn't just changed my financial circumstances, it had changed me. Not through revenge or bitterness, but through the power of claiming what was rightfully mine. Not just assets, but agency over my own story. The path forward stretched before me now, unwritten and full of possibility. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.